On today's episode, we are back with a healthy dose of the Tackle Talk Mailbag. We've got a pretty wide assortment of topics here today, from kayak fishing in the wind, to weight shape for punching weeds, to bite predicting phone apps, Cashion Rods, Lews Reels, and a ton more on today's episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello everybody, I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear. Unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, the Tackle Talk Podcast is brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. And if you tuned in last week to our $100 rod shootout episode, those top three rods in our standings, the Fenwick Eagle, the Shimano SLX, and the Daiwa Tatula XT, are all currently available over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com. They're all $99, and if you use our code TackleTalk5, that makes them $95. And if you're an elite member, you get an extra 10% back, so it really makes it like $85, which is an absolute steal for all three of those rods. And I've had a few people recommend this over the past week, so I think it's a good idea. What I'm going to do today, in the description of today's episode and last week's episode, I'm going to add the link for each of those exact rods to make them easier to find over on the ALF website. So if you want to check out any of those three rods that were in our top three last week, the links will be in the description today. Really easy to find. But if you're in the market for anything else, rods, reels, line, baits, ALF has you covered. They're fantastic folks over there. Brian, Adam, Chad, Hans, Rob, Jacob, they're all great folks, and they're there to help make sure they get you the best gear at the best prices with the best service that you will find from any tackle retailer, hands down. They have a price match guarantee on their website. They have fast shipping, great customer service from the team over there, and an awesome selection of new and used fishing gear over on the website right now. Or if you're in the Evansville, Indiana area, stop and check out their beautifully remodeled showroom, try out some gear, tell them Andrew from Tackle Talk said hey, and check out my favorite tackle shop in all of the Midwest. So go over and check them out, www.americanlegacyfishing.com, and be sure to use code TACKLETALK5 for an extra 5% off on almost all regularly priced and sale items. Okay, folks, first up here, we have some fresh results from the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. So the MLF BPT just wrapped up Stage 4 at Lake Chickamauga and Nickajack in Chattanooga, Tennessee this past weekend, May 1st through 4th, and boy, did it have some fireworks. So let's jump into your top 10 here, and then we will recap the wild finish that ensued at the end of this thing. So 10th place went to Justin Lucas, 9th Justin Cooper, 8th place Drew Gill, 7th went to Matt Becker, 6th Michael Neal, 5th Wesley Strader, 4th went to Ron Nelson, 3rd Cole Floyd, and then we hit your top 2. And I want to set this up for you. So all day long, Jake Lawrence had been leading this thing, but Jacob Wheeler had been inching closer to him all day. And then for the last hour or two, he was just breathing down Jake Lawrence's neck, figuratively speaking, of course, but about 1 to 2 fish off the lead. And I don't know if there's a more intimidating situation in fishing than trying to maintain a 1-fish lead ahead of maybe the most dominant angler on the planet right now, Jacob Wheeler, on Wheeler's home water on Championship Sunday. But Jake Lawrence did just that for most of Sunday afternoon. But then, near the end, with 6 minutes left, Jacob Wheeler is down 3 pounds and 7 ounces, and this happens.
Wheeler's hooked up here.
Come on, one more.
He needs 3.7 to take the lead. Wheeler says it's big. Might it ever be?
Come on, fish.
Taking his time with it. Needs to be 3.7 to give him the lead. Oh my. Oh my.
Here.
3 pounds, 12 ounces.
Wheeler leads it with 5 minutes to go. I don't know if Jake Lawrence can hear the cheers, but he will soon hear that bass on the score tracker.
So that fish, a stud smallmouth, puts Wheeler up by 6 ounces with about 5.5 minutes left, and that lead actually holds until about 30 seconds left in the event. And Jake Lawrence, who has time for one more cast, you can't script this, is casting a big squeaky buzzbait, which he caught probably about a third of his fish on for that day so far. So an awesome day to watch. He's catching fish on topwater on a buzzbait. It's awesome. But he had to make a choice. He had time for one more cast, and he could either cast to an area and an exact cast that he had made time and time again that day where he'd caught a few, so that cast had been good to him, or there was an area over to the other side that he hadn't casted in at all that was a little fresh and kind of an unknown. And you have to make a split-second decision where you're going to cast, and he casted toward the completely unknown fresh area. And Jake Lawrence made one final cast to that unknown spot, and this happened.
Jake Lawrence could still catch one. With 30 seconds left, it would have to be 2 pounds. Lawrence is hooked up. Has to have it over the gunnel of the boat before time expires. It also must be 2 pounds. Lawrence gets it in. He'll get it on. Jake Lawrence.
Are you kidding me?
At the wire.
It really just happened.
To have this one over the gunnel of the boat. Time has expired. He won't get it in. It might have been the winner. This will be the winner. Lawrence with the winner seals it.
Are you kidding me?
Just in the nick of time.
So that fish crosses the gunnel of his boat with about 10 seconds left, a true buzzer beater, and then they pan over to Jacob Wheeler, who is also hooked up and has what would have probably been the answering winning fish, but he can't get it over the side of his boat in time. Time expires, and Jake Lawrence wins what is surely one of the most exciting finishes in MLF history, and maybe even bass fishing history, given the format and the time expiring and seeing it all unfold live. Jake Lawrence with a buzzer beater on a buzzbait to beat Jacob Wheeler in Wheeler's backyard and win his first Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour title. What a finish at Lake Chickamauga and Nickajack at Stage 4. So a huge congratulations to Jake Lawrence. A heck of a battle, a great effort from Wheeler as well. The back and forth was so fun to watch all day long. But Jake Lawrence takes home $150,000 and his first red trophy at Stage 4 of the 2025 Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. Okay, folks, today we are going to get into some mailbag questions. We are long overdue for some mailbag answers here with the last few weeks. Obviously, we had our tariff episode. We had our episode on the $100 rods last week. A couple weeks before that, we had our Easton Fothergill episode. So we're really behind on some of these mailbag questions. So I want to take some time today and get into a ton of different topics that you guys have submitted that you'd like us to talk about here. So the first question is from Jake, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, love the show. I live and fish in Virginia where grass is a major factor as things warm up. I'm planning on employing the punch rig this summer to attack those thick grass mats. My question is, with how expensive those 1.5 to 2 ounce tungsten weights can be, is there any reason why you couldn't use an egg sinker instead? For the same weight and a fraction of the price, would it be worth it, or is tungsten or the bullet shape of the worm weight that much more effective?" Good question. That's an awesome question to start out here, Jake. Thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. My short answer is going to be yes, it matters. And it matters because your ability to efficiently punch through those weeds and mats is not only a matter of pure weight, but it's also a matter of the shape of that weight and the size of that weight. So if you hold like a tarp stretched out with like 4 people, one at each corner, and then you drop like a 5-pound ball from 10 feet up, and then right beside that, you drop a 5-pound razor sharp spear from that same 10-foot ladder, even though they both weigh the same, one is definitely going to pierce through that tarp much easier. And it's kind of the same thing with a flipping weight. When you're flipping, you want something that will slide or pierce through that weed layer more easily, which means you want a slender, pointed bullet shape weight, and you also want the heaviest weight at the most compact size. The more surface area that weight has, the harder it is to punch through. So that's why a flipping tungsten weight is the go-to for that type of thing, because with a bullet shape, it's got that shape to pierce through that layer of weeds. It also, because it's tungsten, can pack more weight in a smaller body because tungsten is more dense than lead, obviously. So short answer, yes, they're worth it. Now, could, like capital COULD, could you punch through certain situations with a big egg sinker? Yes, maybe, but you can also, dig a hole in the ground with your hands or a shovel. The shovel is more effective, even though technically, yeah, you might be able to dig a hole with your hands. It's kind of the same thing with tungsten bullet flipping weights. Could you do it with something else? Yes, probably, but is there a reason why tungsten flipping weights are so popular? Yes, there definitely is. It makes the job a lot easier. All right, the next question here is from Tad, and he says, the last 3 years, I've caught larger bass fishing from my kayak, an 11-foot Pelican, versus my boat, which is a Ranger VS 1882. Same water, same lures, same techniques, same spots. Any suggestion on why this may be occurring? Yeah, as a kayak guy myself, I think I know why, at least anyway, I would assume you're catching more fish in the kayak versus the boat. Two things come to mind for me. The first is that a kayak is far more stealthy than a boat, and it's not even close. A big boat, it displaces more water, it casts a bigger shadow, the trolling motors are loud, fish can feel and hear that trolling motor from so far away it's not even funny. So it's not a matter of if the fish know you're there in a boat, it's a matter of if they care. In a kayak, you at least have a chance of causing less commotion and drawing less attention to yourself. And I think that helps sometimes, especially around skittish or really pressured fish. The other thing is that a kayak can go where boats can't go, and that's the beauty of a kayak. Sometimes that means you can get shallower or back farther in those creek arms than a boat can, but other times it just means that you are able to access completely different bodies of water in a kayak versus a boat. You can kayak fish on whole bodies of water you can't even get close to putting your Ranger in, and you know that obviously. You have both. Ponds, small lakes with no boat ramps, you can get a kayak in there where you just can't get a boat in there, and that leads to better success sometimes too. Places with less access typically have less pressured fish, and you can have a lot better day there. So they're just two different beasts. But I think kayaks in general, they are more stealthy, and you have more access to water. Both of those, I think, are reasons why kayak fishing is so effective in many places. All right, the next question here is from Mike, and he says, what gear would you use to throw light, like 1/8 ounce or lighter bottom contact baits on a casting reel? And in parentheses, he says, is this considered BFS? Or should I just stick to a spinning rod for anything under, say, 3/8 or maybe 1/4 ounce? Side question, and feel free to email me if you don't want to include this on the show. I'm also about ready to pull the trigger on an NRX 852. I'm thinking I'm going to pair it with a Vanford, but is there a different high-end reel that you would choose? And would you personally just stick with a setup like this as opposed to a casting setup for light tackle? Oh boy, Mike, you're going to get me in trouble with the BFS bros again. And I already know that they don't like me because I'm not a big BFS guy. But for me, yes, I consider like 1/8 ounce or lighter in BFS territory for a casting reel for sure. Now, I know I'm going to get messages after this. I can see them already lighting up my DMs saying 1/8 ounce isn't BFS. That's not even close. BFS isn't just light tackle. It's a lifestyle, dude. You got to throw 1/1062nd ounce maggot jigs. That's BFS. Whatever. I can see it coming. But man, I think anything that light, like 1/8 ounce or under, should go on a spinning rod. And call me old school, call me a hater, I don't know, but I prefer to throw light stuff on a good old-fashioned spinning setup. And there's a reason why the heavy majority of anglers out there agree. BFS can be effective, BFS can be fun, but it's nowhere near the most popular choice for that light gear, and the spinning rod is still king. In fact, if you look at tackle sales over the past couple years, spinning gear has been increasing while casting gear has been decreasing. Now, you might say, well, yeah, forward-facing sonar and all that stuff. That's partly true for sure, but what are guys throwing on forward-facing sonar? They're throwing really light jig heads and stuff like that could be thrown on spinning gear or BFS, and almost all of them are still choosing spinning gear. So spinning still holds that spot in my book. Now, you ask about a very specific all-around setup, the G. Loomis NRX 852S with a Vanford on it. I'll make this very simple. That combo, the NRX Plus with a Vanford on it, is the single best rod and reel combo that I have ever used, bar none. But of course, it's very expensive, so it should be one of the best combos I've ever used. And it's definitely not for everybody. Not everybody needs an $800 or a $900 combo, especially a spinning combo. There's a lot of people listening right now that are rolling their eyes even thinking about that, and I completely understand. So that should probably be said as well, just because it's out there and just because it's available and it's an option fishing does not mean that it's for everybody. It's the same thing with like, yes, there are Lamborghinis made every single day. Do any of us listening to this need a Lamborghini? No. I drive a Toyota truck. There's people listening to this drive Camrys and whatever. We don't need those. Just because they exist, just because they look cool, just because they are cool, and maybe in some metrics objectively are better, does not mean that we all need them. So different strokes for different folks. Obviously, we understand that too. But if you have the money, if you like really high-end gear and that's your thing, and you're going to spend around that amount for some combo, that's the combo that I would go with. I have the 872 versus the 852, but both are very similar rods. The one you're looking at is probably honestly a better fit for most people. It's 2 inches shorter, which makes it like 7'1", a great all-around size and model. But yes, I would have no reservations buying that combo if you're looking in that price range. But yeah, if it were me, I'd be throwing all of that stuff on spinning gear anyway versus investing in a nice BFS combo. All right, the next question here is from Jacob, and he says, do you have any favorite fishing apps when it comes to checking bite times or baits to use, such as Bass Forecast? I'm a fan of the show, Jacob. Fishing apps. Now, we've talked about other apps before that I affectionately refer to as spot burning apps like FishBrain, or I think one of them is called Fish Angler or things like that. But this is a little different. You're asking about specific bite time apps like Bass Forecast. For me, no. Very simple answer. Because apps like that, in my opinion, are trying to quantify the unquantifiable. They're trying to create an algorithm to answer a question that just has too many variables. If I'm going to fish in a 3-foot deep pond that's muddy or weed choked and it has nothing but largemouth and bluegill in it, and I'm fishing it on a very windy day, and then my buddy on the other side of town is going to fish a 100-foot deep crystal clear rock quarry with smallmouth and perch and gizzard shad in an area that's protected by the wind and also has, like a bunch of field runoff that's coming into it from a recent rain, so it's starting to cloud it up. Those are two completely different scenarios. Species, depth, water temp, cloud cover, wind, clarity, tree cover, bottom composition, pressure. I mean, there are hundreds of variables that can come into play when you're fishing, and setting aside the fact that fish are just living, breathing things that act independently and aren't programmed to follow some sort of rigid rules or algorithm, I don't think that an app can accurately take all of that into consideration. Instead of relying on an app that's trying to oversimplify things to give you sort of like a false sense of security as an angler, I would just learn to watch the weather, watch your conditions, make mental notes of, successes and failures, and then try and find times and places that replicate those good days and avoid replicating the conditions of your bad days. I think that's the very simple way to do it that people have been doing for probably hundreds of years at this point, and I don't think you really need an app to kind of skew that at all. Okay, the next question is from Brett, and he says, so piggybacking off of 2 weeks ago's tariff episode, I've been on the fence about who to start getting my future rods from. I've really enjoyed my Dobbins rods, but the GSM acquisition is leaving a sour taste in my mouth on them for now. With tariffs being something to think about, I'm leaning towards someone who makes their rods here in the USA. Do you have any thoughts or experience on Cashion rods? Okay, so this is probably, and I'm going to be honest here, probably the next rod company that I'm going to give a serious look to, or at least try a rod or two from. I think it's going to be Cashion, because I've had a lot of people recommend them to me recently. And again, with tariff situations and stuff, it does, you're right, financially maybe makes sense to look at someone making something in the USA, at least for the short term and maybe even the long term. But Cashion is one of those rods. I've only ever had one Cashion rod in my life, and I think it was called an Elite, but I looked on their website. I don't even know if they make Elites anymore, but I feel like that's what it was called. It had a black and yellow handle on it. I don't think it was the Icon. I want to say it was called Elite, but either way, a lot of their rods have this kind of tweed sort of, zigzag textured material looking grip to them that just turned me off on them for a long time. I didn't like how it felt. I didn't like how it looked. It just wasn't my cup of tea. And I feel like, I know I harp a lot of times on grips, but grips, you got to remember, are the one piece that your hand is touching. fishing. I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on the actual grip itself, and they put a lot of emphasis obviously on the blank and the components and the sensitivity and stuff. That's all great, but if a rod is not comfortable in my hand, then it means nothing. So I want that rod to feel good in my hand. If I'm going to have it in my hand and using it for 8 hours straight, I don't want it to be a material or a feel or ergonomics that I don't like. So that handle situation that they have going on, that they still have on a couple of their rods, is not my cup of tea, but they do have a rod that I've wanted to try for a little while now, and it's called the Element. They have cork handles on it, which again, plus for me. They're only $129, and they're supposedly 100% made in the USA. So I'm definitely curious about them. I want to give one a try here pretty soon. That will probably be my next purchase in the sort of entry to mid-level area. I think a Cashion Element is on that short list. All right, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, folks. But first, we have some big news. We've teased it a couple times. We talked about it a couple weeks ago, but it's finally here, the Tackle Talk Podcast Essentials Box from Dark Horse Tackle. So very simply, the boys over at DHT and I teamed up to build what I think is the ultimate box full of what I would call my essential baits, like the types of baits that I'm not leaving home without almost any time of year. And it's a one-time purchase. This is not a subscription deal. This is a one-time box curated by yours truly to make what I think is a very well-rounded, value-packed box for beginners, for intermediates, for tournament anglers, for everybody in between. Now, just like last time we talked about it, I'm not going to spoil what is completely in the box in terms of brands and stuff, but it's DHT, so you know it's going to be great American companies, small, awesome tackle makers that you're going to get introduced to through this box. But the types of baits that you're going to get in this box, you're going to get a pack of tungsten weights, you're going to get a flipping jig, you're going to get a bladed jig, a buzz bait, a pack of swim baits, a popper, a square bill, a spinner bait, soft plastic craws, soft plastic stick baits, swimming jig heads, offset worm hooks, wide gap wacky hooks, a gift card to Dark Horse Tackle, and more, all under $80. At $79.99 is your total purchase for a box chock full of bass essential baits. And if you want to crunch the numbers, the face value of everything in this box would be over $110. So you're getting almost 30% off MSRP on these baits. So not only is it a great box with everything you already need in it, you're also saving a ton of money. And I said this last time, I want to make sure I say it again. I'm not making any money off this box. This is by no means a moneymaker for us here at Tackle Talk. This is just because one of the most frequently asked questions we get and the boys over at Dark Horse Tackle get is, how do I build a complete tackle box? Or the other big one is, where do I start? I'm just getting into fishing. I'm getting back into fishing. I have a son or a daughter that I'm trying to get a birthday present for or something like that. There's always people that are just looking for kind of everything to be taken care of in one single box. And this box, I think, will help you do that. This, again, has what I would call the essentials. So they are first come, first serve. We are doing a limited run of these, but you can go pre-order your box now over at www.darkhorsetackle.com. Be sure to reserve one in case they sell out. It's right there on the homepage, or you can click Dark Horse Tackle boxes at the top of the page, and then one of the choices right there will be Tackle Talk Bass Essentials box from Dark Horse Tackle. Again, www.darkhorsetackle.com. Okay, the next question is from Ryan. He says, "Hey Andrew, I've been wondering if you know of any good and cheap beginner kayaks. I'm in high school and I'm broke, so cheap is definitely the main thing. Anyways, thanks for all your hard work on the podcast. I've listened to over 20 episodes in the last few weeks." Ryan from Missouri. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Glad you found the show. Man, I hear you. I've been in that situation too. When you're first starting out and you're getting into a kayak, there are a few really good cheap kayaks out there that will at least do that job. They will get you off the shore and they'll get you used to kayak fishing, and they will let you sort of unlock these parts of these lakes and ponds and stuff that you haven't been able to get to. And that is the main point of getting into a kayak as a beginner, is trying to explore and just getting offshore and finding those new places, or hitting the places you've always fished, but just from a different direction or a different angle. And I think once you get off the shore, it just unlocks so much more of that water. So I'm right there with you. As far as cheap kayaks go, my dad had I think it was called a Sun Dolphin 10. He bought it from Tractor Supply Company. It was like $250. It was a great little kayak, did everything that it needed to do. That's a good option. Then you could look at something like a Lifetime kayak. I think those are somewhere around like the $400 range, or you can go with like an Ascend 10T. That's a little bit better of a kayak, I would say, for a beginner. It's about $600. That's one of the first actual fishing kayaks that I ever had. It served me great for a couple years. I beat the tar out of that thing, and it really taught me a lot about kayak fishing. The other thing you can do is keep your eye on Facebook Marketplace and buy one used, because there are a ton of really good kayak deals on my local pages and Facebook and everything like that. You just have to be a little bit more careful when you're buying a Facebook Marketplace kayak versus buying one new in the store, obviously, because previous owners, they treat their kayaks different. Not all kayaks are treated equally on the secondary market. Some people abuse them. Some people store them incorrectly. They could have been kept out in the sun and now they're warped. They could have cracks, a lot of issues. So look over that kayak very carefully before you buy anything on Facebook Marketplace. If you can, I know it's tough, if you can find somebody to meet you at a body of water so you can get in it and try it first, that is by far the best way to do it. And I feel like a lot of people don't take that step. They just go to that person's house, they look it over, they don't see any obvious cracks or anything, and then they're good to go. First time they take it out on the water, you start getting water inside, and you're like, oh, I probably should have checked this first. So if you can, just have that person meet you at a little stream or a pond or something and get in it and make sure it's not taking on water and make sure that structurally it is all good to go. But you can find some great deals on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or places like that, because sometimes you just have somebody that bought a kayak and then they used it a couple times, they realized that they didn't want it anymore, or them and their wife or whatever had a really good idea of like, hey, we're going to get into kayaking, and then they do it twice and they never do it again, and they're like, get these things out of the garage. So you can find some really good deals on Facebook Marketplace. Again, you just have to be careful, do your due diligence, check them out first. That's what I would probably do. I would probably at least look around used before I go new. If you go new, Sun Dolphin, Lifetime, Ascend, all great options in that lower price point. All right, the next question is from Lewis, and he says, hey, Andrew, love the podcast. I've been listening nonstop at work, and I'm almost caught up. I love all the useful information you provide, and I find it really helpful. My question is, I'm fishing from the kayak. How do you handle drifting in windy conditions? Do you use it to your advantage, or do you have a go-to technique or lure for windy days? I mainly fish on reservoirs and lakes, and I really have a hard time on those windy days. Any advice you could provide would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for all the work that you put into the podcast for us listeners. Thanks, Lewis. Appreciate it. Another good kayak question. This could go for boats too, I guess. Again, I'm not really a boat guy, so I might be talking out of my tail on that one, but it basically comes down to setting up correctly and then just kind of toughing it out. So if you have a particular spot that you want to fish in the kayak, I typically set up on the downwind side of that piece that I actually want to fish. So the wind is blowing right in my face, and since I'm on the downwind side of it, the wind is not trying to push me into that spot that I want to fish. That's important to me because I don't want to go over it. I don't want to spook those fish. I don't want to get too close. I would rather it push me away from what I'm trying to fish and go back up to it and make more casts versus it below me right into that laydown or that brush pile or, over that ledge or whatever I'm trying to fish. I would rather stay off of it and fight my way back to it versus go over it and try and fight my way almost in reverse to keep from hitting that thing. And the other thing in this situation is an anchor is your friend. So if you set up on the downwind side of that and you throw an anchor off the front of your kayak, that's going to keep you in position faced right toward the spot that you want to fish. The only thing you're going to have to battle is casting into the wind. But again, that's not always a bad thing because you cast into the wind when you're bringing that bait back to you. Your bait is coming with the wind. That will help it get some depth. It's coming sort of the more natural direction and it's not fighting those waves or that current that's made by that wind. So I typically like to do that, but you can do the opposite. You can set up on the upwind side of that spot and you can anchor from your back. So if you have like an anchor trolley, just kind of shimmy it to the back and now your anchor position is at the back of your kayak. You are faced with the wind at your back, facing that spot that you want to fish and it's keeping your kayak in place. You can do that too. Obviously, since you're casting with the wind in that situation, your cast is going to go farther. You're going to be able to bomb cast that thing. So the nice part there is you can set up a little farther away from the thing that you want to fish because you're going to get more casting distance. The negative is you're working your bait back against the wind. And since the wind is making waves and kind of making a little bit of current the opposite direction of you and the opposite direction of that bait, a lot of times I see that bait tend to want to rise and that wind is pushing against my line. Both of those usually are not my favorite things to deal with. So I typically like to go and cast into the wind and bring my bait back toward me and just set up on the downwind side of that piece of structure. But totally up to you. Basically, if you're paddling, an anchor is your friend. If you're pedaling, just face into the wind and just lightly pedal and hold your spot. I do that a lot. Or if you have a motor, do the same thing. Just face into the wind and put your motor on like a super low setting or speed and almost just spot lock right there so that your motor is counteracting the wind. You can do that with motor or pedals. That's one of my favorite things to do too. So that's typically what I do. And then usually, unfortunately, when you're out there in the whipping wind, that's followed by a lot of bad words and frustration because wind and a kayak are not a match made in heaven. It's just going to be frustrating no matter what. But those are a couple things you can do to at least hold your spot and effectively get a couple casts on whatever you want to fish. All right, the next question here is from Nick, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, I want to start off by saying thank you for all that you do, literally. About 5 years ago, I finally got back into bass fishing. I started with an Ascend 128X, and now I've upgraded to a Vexus 20-foot bay boat. The kayak doesn't get neglected, though, don't worry. Anyways, while my journey back into fishing started, I found your podcast around the same time. It's almost to a religious point where on Tuesdays, I immediately turn on the new episode to start my day. Your knowledge and straightforwardness on every aspect of fishing in the industry is very admirable. Side note, I was watching the classic and went crazy when you were on the big screen. Okay, now the question. Have you by chance tried out the Lews Speed Spool SS1HG3? I have a handful of expensive reels and I always come back to this speed spool. Never have I had an issue with it. It always casts like butter and the price is killer. Okay, that's it. Thanks for everything you do. Nick from North Carolina. Hey, Nick, first off, what an upgrade. You went from an Ascend 128X to a Vexus. That is awesome. That is an upgrade that I think we all aspire to attain one day. So that's cool. I'm glad that you got back into fishing, 4 or 5 years ago. I'm glad this, silly show can kind of help a little bit with that. That's awesome. But for your question, the new Lews Speed Spools, Nick, I'm going to be completely honest with you. That's what we do here on the show. I don't really sugarcoat things. I'm not a big Lews fan. Now, I should also say I have a pretty small sample size to base that pretty big statement off of. I've only owned 2 Lews casting reels over the years, but neither of those 2 held up, and they were the original Speed Spool LFSs. Now, to be fair, that means the last, Lews that I owned, I probably got rid of like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's been quite a while, but I had such a bad experience with my first Lews Speed Spool LFSs that it kind of soured me on Lews for quite a time after that. And I just looked up the specific Lews that you mentioned. It looks like this is the Gen 3, so probably a new version of the Speed Spool, which I have not tried, so I should be honest with that. It's $99, very competitive price point, but the reviews on it are pretty mixed. I just looked them up. It's got 2.8 stars on its overall review, with some people saying things like, best if you don't buy this. This one says going down the wrong path. The other one says not the best quality. But then right under that, there's people that say best reel ever. There's one here that says best long casting and smooth reel of all time. So the crowd is pretty split on this reel, it looks like, which is kind of my experience with Lews in general. But this is the best part about talking about fishing gear. It never gets old. It never gets boring because different people like different things. If everybody liked the same thing and there was a definitive answer on what was the best rod or the best reel or best line at a certain price point, then fishing gear would be very boring because we would probably only have one of everything. So this is what I appreciate. I love people that are like, hey, I absolutely love this thing and will run through a brick wall for this reel or this rod or line or whatever that I, Andrew, personally don't like. I mean, we had that a couple weeks ago. A couple of you mentioned it. It was really funny when we had Easton Fothergill on. He mentioned how much he loved Seagar Red Label. I absolutely hate Seagar Red Label. He is a Bassmaster Classic champion and I am some schlub that fishes Farm Creek. So what do I know? That's the fun part about fishing gear, is that everybody has preferences, everybody has different experiences, and that's why we have and are lucky enough, I think, to have hundreds of options for rods, reels, baits, all that type of stuff. That's what makes it fun to talk about. But good for you. I'm glad you found a good $99 reel that you absolutely love. Kudos on the Vexus. Kudos on making some big strides in 5 years. And thanks for listening to the show. I appreciate it. All right, the next question is from Hayden, and he says, hi, Mr. Andrew. First off, Hayden, you don't have to call me Mr. He says, my name is Hayden, and I'm 13. Okay, well, there you go. I give you permission as a 13-year-old, Hayden. You do not have to call me mister, I promise you. He says, I listen to your podcast all the time, and I just wanted to ask some questions. So my first one is, other than bass, do you fish for anything else? I'm curious about other species. Bass fishing is my main thing, but I also fish a lot for catfish too. I also fish for drum and flounder and others in saltwater. I just got my PB black drum out of the surf. It was over 50 pounds. Goodness. My second question is, how do I start something similar to Tackle Talk? I've really wanted to start a fishing YouTube channel, but I don't know where to begin. I once tried, but I was using cut bait, and my only video had some vegan dude start getting real upset with me in the comments. Anyway, last question. Do you think you could ever do an episode about surf fishing? Just wanted to say thanks for everything you do. You've really inspired me. Tight lines, Hayden. Hey, Hayden, thanks for writing in, man. First off, really easy question. Yes, I fish for other species too, just not very often. But I would say probably 95% of my fishing is for some sort of bass, whether it be largemouth or smallmouth. And then I have a small side of muskie fishing in the spring and in the fall, and then a side of sawguy in the wintertime. And that's about it. I really don't like pan fishing unless it's like ice fishing season, I guess. I'll do that for a couple days. Crappie isn't really my cup of tea. I really do not like catfishing just because I get bored too easily and my mind starts to wander. I really need to be doing something all the time. So the heavy majority of what I do is bass fishing. But it sounds like you live near some good saltwater fishing, which, you know, you're catching flounder and drum and all of that. I'm definitely jealous. If I lived near saltwater, I feel like I would get hooked on that pretty quickly because of the variety of things that you can target. So it might be a good thing that I don't live near saltwater because I'd get too sidetracked all the time. But I probably wouldn't be a good person to do an episode on surf fishing because I've only done it like a few times, and all we did was go out in the morning at the beach and cast little shrimp out and catch saltwater catfish. So that's probably not going to be a very interesting episode. I don't think that's probably something we'll cover anytime soon. But to your second question, how do you start doing something like Tackle Talk or like a YouTube channel? The answer there is you just do it. There's no magic tip or secret to success with YouTube or podcasts or any sort of like content creation. You just have to create it, post it, and stay consistent. That's it. You can ask anybody that has a YouTube channel and they will tell you the exact same thing. It's all about consistency. Keep creating, keep posting, and the biggest step is just simply starting it. Going from idea to execution is the one step that everybody puts off, and that's how you wake up in 10 years and say, man, I really wish I would have done this, right? It could be anything. It doesn't have to be YouTube or podcast, anything in your life. So don't wait. There is absolutely no better time to start whatever it is you want to do, especially YouTube or podcast or anything like that, than today. And that goes for anything you want to do in your life. In the words of the great philosopher Shia LaBeouf,
Do it! Just do it!
Okay, next question here is from Dave, and he says, thank you for making my Tuesdays at work less miserable. I was just curious if your episode, The Only 5 Combos You Need, still stands or if you've changed it up at all. Thanks, man. Take care, Dave. Well, hey, Dave, thanks for writing in. I'm glad we can make the workday a little better for you. I won't tell your boss, I promise. But good question. I would say the very simple answer on this one is, while over the years, I would say my specific rod that I've chosen to fit in each of those 5 categories might have changed a little bit on like the brand or the model or something like that. Those might have changed, but the 5 types of rods still remain the same. Those 5 rods, an all-around casting rod, a jerkbait or topwater rod, a cranking rod, a frog and flipping stick, and then an all-around spinning combo. Those are still my 5 go-to rods that I think every bass angler should have. That itself has not changed even in the past, 4 or 5 years since that episode has come out. The only thing that I might add at this point, if you throw them, would be a big glide bait rod, because that's a rod that's a little tough, even to throw on your frog rod if you really had to. But even that rod is a stretch for most people. I still think the heavy majority of people are not out there throwing 6 to 9 inch glide baits on a regular basis. Okay, the last question here is from Ott Defo. Okay, before I read this, ladies and gentlemen, we have an imposter on our hands. And I know this because to submit a mailbag question, you have to also answer a few questions to make sure you're not a robot or you're not spamming, and you have to enter your email address. And this person entered an email address, which on the surface looks like it could be Ott's. It's the right name and, looks like it could be real, but that is not Ott's email address. We've had Ott on the show before. I know Ott's email, and that is not it. So folks, we do have an imposter on our hands, but regardless, their question, whoever fake Ott Defo is when are you going to do another crankbait complete episode. Okay, that makes it even funnier. There's another layer, because if Ott was going to write in a question, Ott is a huge crankbait guy, so this makes even more sense. But to answer that question, Imposter Ott, I would say we will probably do one in like mid-summertime, because I really want to do a deep dive, no pun intended, I guess, on deep diving crankbaits. I want like 10 foot or deeper, cranking ledges and points and offshore stuff in the middle of summer. I would love to do a full episode on that, and I would probably guess that will happen somewhere around like mid-July timeframe. I want to talk about XDs, DTs, all the deep staple crankbaits, when, where, why to throw them. I think that would be a really awesome episode that we'll just have to track down the right guest for. Okay, everybody, that is today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. As always, be sure to find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you can leave us a review, that would help a ton. Go over to the website, tackletalkpodcast.com. There we have mugs, t-shirts, decals, all kinds of stuff. If you guys want to help support the show, we appreciate it. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Tackle Talk Podcast, and we will see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.